Hi, my name's Paige. Welcome to my channel. I'm back again with another book video, and today we're going to be going over what I read in June. As you probably already know, June is over and July is upon us, but I wanted to wait until the very end so that I caught every book that I could possibly do in this wrap-up. If you follow me on Goodreads, which you should, then you probably know that one of these books I actually finished July 1st, but we're gonna pretend like I finished it in June, because if I hadn't, then this wrap-up would only be 3 books. With that being said, I did finish 4 books in June. I would have liked to finish more. I did try a couple other books, and we're gonna go over those before I get into the books I did read. I ended up being happy with what I read though. It was kind of diverse. I enjoyed them all a lot. There were none that I didn't like, so I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. But with all that being said, let's get into it. So I started a few books in June that I hoped to finish and did not. I'm hoping that I will eventually finish them in the coming months, hopefully this month. One of them was Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is a sci-fi kind of dystopian novel about a world where nobody dies naturally anymore, so there has to be an organization of scythes who go around and control the population. The 2 main characters, protagonists, are people who were chosen, they're teenagers who were chosen to become scythes in the future. I heard a lot of really good reviews about this book, and definitely not saying that it's not a good book, I just don't think I picked it up at the right time. I hadn't read what I felt was truly young adult for a while when I picked this book up, and I definitely was feeling those young adult vibes, if you know what I mean. I really liked the idea of this book, I like the concept, but I could definitely pick out those kind of tropes, especially with the romance. I think it's supposed to be kind of a teen angst romance, and I really like those kind of romances, but I wasn't feeling it in this book. I actually think I could have done without any romance in this book, especially because the concept and the setting are so interesting. So with that being said, I don't think it's a series that I would continue unless when I finally do finish this book I feel like it's maybe different from what I thought. I am a little under halfway through with it, so maybe by the end I'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. Anyway, the next book I started in June but did not get to finish was Crazy Rich Asians by Kwan. I mentioned the movie in one of my vlogs, I think my first vlog in England, because I watched the movie for like the 3rd time and I really enjoy the movie. So I picked up this book finally. I've been waiting actually a while to finally pick up this book, and I have a hard time getting through it. I think it's because the movie kind of dumbs down the families a little bit so that it's easier to understand all of the branches of every family tree. And this book definitely doesn't dumb anything down. It's very, you have to learn who everyone is, you have to do it quickly, and there's also a lot of Hokkien terms or phrases that I obviously don't know, and even though there are footnotes to explain what they mean, sometimes those footnotes don't repeat, and then you're kind of left being like, oh no, what did that mean? In other words, this book just made me feel really dumb because I couldn't remember anything. With that being said, I think when I have a better mindset to take on this book and all of the nuances, I will definitely enjoy it. I just didn't have the brain power or brain span to really dive into this book the way I wanted to. I think I just need to stick to this book alone. I think I need to give it some time, maybe hours, and just finish it in one straight shot so I can remember everything that's being thrown at me. So yeah, still a book I need to trek through, still a book that I want to get through. I just couldn't do it in the amount of time that I had. So the next book that I started in June, it might have actually been the first book I started, was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is the first book in the All Souls trilogy, and I've heard really great things about this series. I've heard really great things. I think there's a TV adaptation. Of course, I was interested in the TV adaptation, but I didn't want to start that without having read the book yet. So I did, and I have to say that I was really enjoying it, especially because it's set in Oxford, which I was just in Oxford, so it's like, oh my gosh. However, her writing is kind of similar to Diana Gabaldon's writing in that it's very descriptive, sometimes too much so, or maybe not even descriptive, but like she spends a lot of time on scenes or conversations that I just don't think are completely necessary. I think that's why the book is kind of big, and, you know, having kind of recently finished the third book in the Outlander series, I am a little bit worn out from super lengthy books like this. So another book that I don't think I was completely in the mindset for, even though I was looking for this kind of book. This is like an urban fantasy. The protagonist is a witch who is a professor studying in Oxford for, I think, maybe a thesis or something. And she discovers a grimoire that is highly desired by like every supernatural creature in the entire world. They all kind of congregate in Oxford to track her down. With urban fantasy like this, there is usually a strong romantic component, and there is, as far as I can tell so far. I think I need to take this book in strides, like slowly, whereas with Crazy Rich Asians, I think I need to take it faster. I need to take it, you know, all at once. This book, I think I need to take slowly. I was pushing myself too hard to read it, like maybe at a faster or even my kind of normal pace with a book, and I just don't think that's the way to take this book, especially because it's so big, and like I said, I'm a little bit worn out from lengthy novels. Last but not least, and I truly sprinted to try to finish this book in time because I wanted to talk about it so bad, was The Diviners by Libba Bray. If you watched my recent book haul, you know that I talked about this book because I got it in that haul, and I was super excited to get it. So after I finished the last book of this month, I was rushing to finish this book, hoping that I could get it into this video, but I could not. However, I am halfway through. I'm really enjoying it, like, a lot. It pains me not to talk about it a lot in this video, but hopefully for my July wrap-up, we can talk about this book, because it's really good. If you want more of a synopsis on this book, watch my last video, but basically it's a historical fiction fantasy set in the 20s. That's all you need to know. It's so good so far, so that's all I'm gonna say. But I just want you to know that I want to talk about it, I just can't. Okay guys, without further ado, let's talk about what I actually read in June. So the first book I finished was The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Harden. This was an excellent choice to read. I think from me telling you what books I couldn't get through fully by the end of this month, you can kind of tell that I was in a bit of a reading lull. It seemed like every book I picked up, I read about halfway through and then I was kind of bored. I've had this book for a little bit. I've been wanting to read it, but I just never picked it up. And then finally, I think because it was a little bit shorter than the other books I was trying to read, I decided to give it a go and see if it would maybe bring me back to life. I was not disappointed. This book, I think this book might make it into my favorite books of 2019. So this is an historical fiction fantasy slash fairy tale retelling following mainly a girl named Vasilissa who grows up in the wilderness kind of, or the countryside of Russia. I flew through this book really quickly. I think maybe the Grisha series is influenced by a little bit of Russian culture, but I've never read a book directly set in Russia. I think what I'll take away from this book is the way that it made me feel. It made me want to believe in the spirits of the forest and protect their sweet innocent souls, because basically this book follows Vasilissa, who hails from a line of witches. So this is about Vasilissa growing up, coming into her own, and then discovering what role she's about to play in the clash, I think, of Catholicism or Christianity and the traditional Russian religion. So I think it would be safe to compare the religion maybe that's being portrayed in this book as maybe pagan. There are a lot of spirits present in the household, in the baths, in the stables, and the townsfolk of the village that Vasilissa is from gives offerings to these spirits to help maintain their lifestyle. But when Christianity and Catholicism takes a stronger grip with the help of a new priest in the village, that kind of goes away and harmfully affects how the village gets through the long winter. This may be a spoiler, so if it is, mute for a second. So what I liked most about this book is the way that Vasilissa goes toe-to-toe with Father Constantine. And I also liked the way that Father Constantine is kind of a complicated character. I kind of wanted to like him because I'm prone to like characters that are sort of set in their ways or just sort of stubborn, and he definitely is. However, at the same time, he's so despicable and so selfish that it was difficult to like him. I was so confused about whether there was going to be a romantic relationship between Vasilisa and him. Kind of throughout him being there and her growing up with him around, he gazes at her a little bit strangely, and she kind of returns that gaze a little bit. But I definitely think by the end he is a villain, he is inexcusable, but still I really enjoyed the way that she faced him. In general, I just really enjoyed her as a protagonist, as a main character. If you're looking for something that might make you a little bit anxious at times, but also just makes you feel like you live on an earth where magical things can happen in the deep, dark woods, then I would highly suggest reading this book. Like I said, that's one of the things about this book that I think is invaluable, the way it makes you feel like anything is possible. It was the first book that I actually finished, and it helped me get on that roll of finishing books that I start. Alright, so the next book I finished in June was Paper Valentine by Brenna Yovanoff. As far as I know, this book and this author are not terribly popular, but I saw this book in the library, and because my library had the audiobook for free, I decided to give it a chance. I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm doing things that I can't use my hands for, like when I'm doing dishes or when I'm drawing, because then at least I'm getting something else done while I'm not able to use my hands. Now, if you've heard of this book or read this book before, then you know that this is kind of an urban, young adult, paranormal fantasy. So yes, there are ghosts in this book. And no, I did not know that there were ghosts in this book, because I think it's a theme at this point that I choose books that typically have ghosts in them or paranormal aspects. It's just something that I've always enjoyed. But I went into this book pretty much blind. I do think it's kind of ironic, though, that I picked out this book simply because of the title and the cover, having no idea that ghosts were even anything to do with it, and of course, what do you know? It's set in a town named Ludlow, where there is a serial killer on the loose who is killing girls and leaving their bodies kind of surrounded by these cheap, junky toys and at least one paper Valentine. It follows a girl named Hannah who recently witnessed the passing of her best friend Lillian a few months before the start of this book, and it just so happens that her best friend is now a ghost who only she can see. So Hannah and Lillian kind of come together to try to solve the mystery of these murders. If I had to describe this book maybe in one word, I would use the word unique. It seemed so realistic, and yet I couldn't help but feel like I was constantly being thrust out of the book because something strange or just a little bit off would happen, where I would be like, okay, so this is kind of like my world, but slightly different. For example, there's a small aspect of the book that is hardly even talked about, but it's brought up multiple times and never explained. Basically, there's like a bird disease going around where there are tons of birds that are just dropping dead everywhere, and it's only really brought up when Hannah is like nudging them off the street and telling her little sister not to touch them. But that's just one of the things about this book that is so unusual. Even though the murder mystery aspect of this book is important, of course, it's actually pretty much overshadowed by the characters, specifically Hannah and Lillian and their relationship. Lillian had an eating disorder which caused her to eventually die from starving herself, and so it's kind of about Hannah and Lillian finally talking about why she chose to do that, her mindset, so it does actually have a lot to do with eating disorders. What's also really important is Hannah finding herself, her true self, by finally becoming friends, becoming more than friends with one of the boys from town, Finney Boone. Finney is supposed to be a kind of rebel. Most of the people, the friends that Hannah has, don't like him because he's kind of from the other side of the tracks. So it's about Hannah trying to reconcile what her friends think with what she thinks, especially about Finney, about what happened to Lillian, and then finally, I think, by the end, knowing her true self, coming to terms with what's happened to her, what she wants her life to look like. But yeah, I think that's what's most important about this book, and if you're interested in reading a book about eating disorders or depression, while also enjoying those more distracting qualities like the murder mystery and the paranormal, this is really a great book, and I think it deserves more attention than it's gotten. And if you're going to try this book out, I don't know if I would recommend the audiobook. Obviously, it was good enough for me to have listened to the whole thing, but honestly, I think that was more because of the book itself and less because of the performance. I could probably do without listening to that specific audiobook ever again. Try out the book first. Alright, next up we have The Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I mentioned reading this book when I got the archived in the mail. This is a young adult dystopian fantasy novel. It's the first in the series Monsters of Verity. It's dual perspective and it follows a girl named Kate and a boy named August. So Kate and August live in a dystopian world where people's violent acts create monsters. Because of these monsters, highly populated places like cities are now kind of war zones. The main city, the main setting of this book is a place called V City, where August lives. The city is split into two and each side is kind of ruled or governed by a different person. So August is the adopted son of the mayor of one side and Kate is the daughter of the mayor of the other side. Basically, Kate was kind of estranged from her father but eventually returns to the city to try to live up to her name as a Harker, and August is sent kind of undercover to go to the same school that she goes to keep an eye on her. So off the bat, pretty big Romeo and Juliet vibes, but I would say that it doesn't really carry over into the book. Like, I wasn't thinking of Romeo and Juliet while I was reading this, especially because Kate and August are definitely not star-crossed lovers. Kate is a bad A. August is kind of quiet, timid, he's artsy, he loves to play the violin. I think, and this might be a spoiler, so mute for a second, I think I would like this book a little bit more if they spent more time on the relationship between August and Kate. Not necessarily the romantic component of it, but simply the friendship that forms between them. Because of their differing beliefs and different upbringing, I was kind of excited to see a little bit more of the way that their friendship forms and kind of more of the why, but that kind of fell away at some point and it just was too quick for my taste. I mean, everything happened realistically. It wasn't like they just became friends and saved the world or anything. It was just, it happened a little bit too quickly for me, especially because Kate had a lot of developing to do. She came to the city with one idea and left with a completely different mindset, and I think that development was something that I was looking forward to the most in this book, and it just went so fast that I felt sad about that. Now, with that being said, I gave this book like 4.5 stars, so I did really enjoy this book. That was just something just small that I kind of was hoping for. I don't know if I'm going to continue this series. I definitely think I should, but then again, just in June alone, I started multiple series, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish them all. I think it'll just depend on what kind of mood I end up being in and if I'm in the mood to continue this story. Although if I'm being honest, I was kind of content with how this ended, just this first book. And I'm kind of not looking forward to maybe ending up being sad about August's fate, because by the end of this book, ooh, I was a little bit worried. So yeah, with that being said, I would be happy to see them reunited and happy together and living in a sunshine world, but we'll see what happens with that. So the last book in June, yes, we are saying it was read in June, okay, was Red Winter by Annette Marie. Like The Diviners, I talked about this in my recent book haul because I got it in the same package. I actually didn't see myself reading this first in those packages, but it just happened. I was reading a lot of urban fantasy, as you can see, and I just felt like I needed a little bit of a break from that. I felt like I needed a change in setting, especially because I read The Bear and the Nightingale recently, and I just really liked being away from the Western or American setting. So I picked this up kind of on a whim, and I was not disappointed. So if you watched my book haul, I kind of talked about the cover. I wasn't super thrilled with it because of the 3D looking girl on the front. Calling it hideous was maybe an overreaction. However, the artwork in the book itself, and I didn't even know it had artwork until I opened it up and was reading it, is so divine. Like, I'm so happy with this artwork. I didn't expect anything to be in here, so that just made it all the more appealing or exciting for me. Like, super kudos to the artist on these because I was just obsessed. By the way, look away if you don't want any spoilers. I don't think these are too big of spoilers, but still. Anyway, so I thought I'd just mention that real quick because this did up the ante for this book a little bit. I was super excited about the artwork in here. So if you didn't watch my haul, this book is about a girl named Emmy who is a kamigakari. A kamigakari is basically the human vessel for a kami or a god. So Emmy, in a couple of months, will become the vessel for the goddess Amaterasu. Like I said in the book haul, I did expect this book to have strong romantic components. I was correct about that in some ways. In other ways, it wasn't as strong as I expected it to be. I talked about the fact that I picked this up because it was advertised to be similar to the anime Kami-sama Kiss, and it is very similar because they provide the artwork of Shiro, the yokai that is very prominent in this story. I could definitely tell that he looks a lot like Tomoe in Kami-sama Kiss. So they did feel very similar. I will say that the main character of this book, Emmy, is pretty different from the Kami-sama Kiss protagonist. I forget what her name is. Emmy is very interesting because she is entirely undeveloped as a human being because she has been completely isolated in the shrines that she's lived at and been raised in. So it was fun to see her kind of develop her wittiness, her sarcasm, but it was also really nice to see that she is a very kind protagonist. One of the sort of tenets of being a kamigakari is to be kind and to not let negative emotions kind of corrupt you. And Emmy definitely is a very kind person. So she's not one of those protagonists that claims to be kind or is supposed to be kind, but actually when you get down to the nitty-gritty, is not. She makes a lot of choices, she does a lot of things that definitely solidify her as being very gentle, very caring, compassionate. And I thought that was a great contrast with Shiro because he is the mischievous fox yokai. He is a little bit too casual sometimes, a little bit harsh, and I think she really offsets that, and he is very pleasantly surprised by that. I won't lie, I was definitely a little bit concerned about this book. I think I'm concerned about any book that is too heavily advertised with another book or another TV series, because then it kind of seems like it's supposed to just fulfill that need for other people. But this is genuinely really well written. There were a couple parts where I was like, meh, maybe that could have been written better, but I think that's kind of with any book, and definitely don't judge this book by how it's advertised. The only thing that I could have done without is Emmy is very frequently passing out. I don't know if the author kind of fully realized how often she does it, but Emmy definitely blacks out a lot, and that's kind of the scene transition for a lot of scenes. It didn't bother me too much. I mean, at some point I just kind of accepted it, and the reality is that she's not a super tough character. I mean, she does know how to shoot an arrow, but she's not a warrior, so for that reason I could kind of justify it. However, if I do end up reading the other books in this series, which I can't decide if I want to or not, to be honest, but if I decide to read them, I am hoping that she gains some skills where she no longer has to black out at every terrifying or violent scene. I spoiled myself a little bit for the other books in this series, which I just did. I don't know how it happened. It always does. And I found out that the other books in this series are quite possibly very sad, so I think I'll put off reading the rest of this series until I'm feeling a little bit more equipped to handle grief. We'll see if I end up reading the rest of this series. So anyway, that's all the books I have for you today. I'm hoping that this month maybe I can read a little bit more, maybe even 5 books, and finish off some series that I've been wanting to finish for a while, maybe even finish one of the series that I started this month. I'm also hoping to fit in maybe a couple mystery thriller novels because, as you saw in my book haul, I do have a couple of those that I really want to read, but we'll see what ends up happening because I feel like when you tell yourself you're going to read more books, you read less. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to keep track of what I'm reading, how I'm feeling about what I'm reading, then follow me on Goodreads or even follow me on Instagram because I'm hoping to also give some more steady updates about what I'm currently reading on there as well. If you're American, I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July, and if you're not, then just have a wonderful weekend, get some reading done. I know I will. And yeah. Hope to see you soon. Bye!